director of East Williams to boss to that too.
Right. All right. Thank you. David Lee with the AP. I'm David Lee with the AP.
Okay.
All right. What can you y'all ready for this? Can you provide what was your reaction to the arguments today?
Well, my initial responses were a lot of curse words, to be honest with you. I believe that there's a lot of semantics and there's a lot of legalese going on right now, and the human life is getting lost in these proceedings. This state is scheduled to kill an innocent man tomorrow, and that should be the only thing we're discussing, and that's not. And so it's been very difficult to see all of the legal parts again erasing his humanity. And so I just right now I'm thinking about Mr. Williams, his family, his loved ones, and how from the inception of this case, he has had his rights violated and has not gotten the due process that he should have over these 20 plus years, and it continues today.
So you probably heard him saying there that today they weren't pursuing the actual innocence claim. They're just pursuing, Batson challenges. It sounds like you're saying you're disappointed that actual innocence is not what's being argued at the moment.
Well, I know that because, and I understand because of what happened with the DNA testing coming back, matching the prosecutor, that evidence was mishandled and corrupted, and that vastly decreased Mr. Williams' side as well as St. Louis County prosecutor's side in being able to argue actual innocence. And that is our point. I'm not necessarily disappointed in them, but we need the Supreme Court to understand that had the prosecution 20 years ago not mishandled this evidence, not just been touching it, and not had, if they had this policy of handling evidence without gloves, etc., that was not the correct policy to have, period, in the prosecutor's office. And I'm also concerned about other cases that they've handled. So I just believe that the prosecutor's mishandling of this evidence 20 years ago is what is harming Mr. Williams today. And that is, and I understand they weren't able to bring forth that innocence claim, but it is because the evidence was corrupted, and that should definitely be taken into account.
A while back, the Attorney General was asked about why he's continuing to pursue this case. This was a few weeks ago, and he said at the time, there has to be some sort of finality to a court decision, ultimately, he said. What was your reaction to that, if you've heard it, and what's your reaction to it now?
I have heard that before, and the fact that finality of a judgment overrides a human person's life, human life, is problematic for me. Nothing should be above actual justice, and nothing should be above making sure that we uphold humanity above all. So the fact that you just want to be done with it because on a piece of paper you got the verdict that you wanted, even though the jurors didn't have all the information, right? That doesn't sit right with however long it takes to get justice, to prove Mr. Williams' innocence, and to make sure his rights are upheld, and that everything is brought out in court. We should take that time. He's been incarcerated for 24 years. They're not necessarily going to let him go tomorrow. So this finality of judgment claim that the AG's office is upholding is ridiculous, especially because they care about this finality of judgment when it's about brown, black, and poor people, right? The AG's office is also saying that they're in agreement with the governor for pardoning Eric DeValcanaire in Kansas City. That was the finality of judgment. Right, he was convicted, sent to prison, but now you want to pardon him and let him go. So these things are very biased still today. There's a lot of racism involved in this process still today, and we're just disheartened the fact that it's even taking this long. But it should take as long as it needs to make sure that justice is actually upheld.
She spoke about nitpicking, about like this is procedural stuff, and it's a man's life. Can you kind of talk about that?
Absolutely. What we need to do is make sure that the circuit court has a full opportunity to evaluate the claims that are present. Mr. Williams' life is literally waiting in the balance. If we continue to talk about the legal issues, minutia, and while it's important whether this motion was filed or the other motion was filed, I think we actually have to get to the issue. Was racism a determining factor in who was on that jury or not? If it was, then we either need to do it again or we need to toss out the conviction. I think that that's the way that should go. If the evidence was improperly handled and it can't be used to exonerate him, should there be a different determination? should this conviction be allowed to stand? If there were a Miranda warning that was failed to be issued, anything taken before that warning would be kicked out. If there were fruit of the poisonous tree because officers searched a residence but at the same time didn't have a warrant to obtain the evidence, that evidence would be kicked out. There should be a similar standard here where the only evidence that could release Mr. Williams from this conviction has been destroyed by the very people that have gathered the evidence and had an opportunity to maintain it.
Ultimately, if a sentence of death is being challenged this substantively, if you're arguing over whether or not to uphold a sentence of death, and that's any sort of substantive argument, should there be more consideration given that this is a capital punishment case?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. The Attorney General's argument about finality really is a double-edged sword, because it is not whether or not we're just going to be done with cases because, oh, we've done this or we filed that motion or we had that hearing. The issue is, did we get to the truth? He's got one job as a prosecutor to get to the truth. He's failed in so many other instances and a myriad of other cases, and this will be yet another public failure of that office to seek the truth and ensure that justice is done in this case. He ought to be arguing for the people, not about a conviction.
Anything else? Obviously, it's like hours left. Anything else you want, like the public kind of needs to know about this?
I'll tell you that dozens and dozens of faith leaders, in conjunction with more than 500,000 people around the country and internationally, are asking Governor Parson to halt this execution. We need to figure out what happened, what went wrong, and is there innocence before, not after. Now's the time. And so we'll continue to call the governor at 573-751-3222 and ask him to halt this execution. Faith leaders are at this moment praying to ensure that Mr. Williams is not murdered unjustifiably. The death penalty, I'm opposed to it on my moral grounds, on my own religious faith. In this case, it's an actual case of innocence, and it would make every Missourian, every taxpayer in this state, complicit in the murder of an innocent man, and that we cannot have.
And I wanted to say lastly, we've also learned that Mrs. Gale's family is opposed to the death penalty. And I know that in this case I talked about the humanity of Mr. Williams, but also there was a victim, and she also left by a grieving family, so we amplified them as well. But with her husband being a medical doctor and someone who is sworn in his profession to uphold human life, they've said they don't want this execution. So when the AG and the governor and other people say, well, we're supporting the victim's family, you're actually not, because those people have publicly said that they don't want this execution. Even in their minds, they believe Mr. Williams is guilty. Again, they are not supportive of an execution. So we're going to listen to the family and amplify the victim's family. We need to do it in this moment as well, not just when they agree with you, but anytime they speak, because their voice matters in this issue also.
It seems to you that the only people that want Marcellus Williams to die is the state.
Correct. And when I say the state, the actual state, the local prosecutor, the victim's family, the community, all have said that we do not agree or approve of this execution taking place. But the only people that care about this quote-unquote finality of judgment is our state elected officials, the AG and the governor. And we need to take that into account. We pay taxes here. We're citizens of this state. And if it's not something that we agree with, and also the victim's family is citizens of this state, they pay taxes. So let's actually listen to the people who are impacted and the decisions being made, and not consider finality of judgment, but about justice and what's actually needed and wanted by our community.
Appreciate it.